that time of the year. There's our dude, our NFL analyst, Jon Cooper Ourlads Guide to the NFL Draft. Jon, great to have you on. We appreciate it. A lot of moving parts. NFL playoffs still have 3 weekends left, and college football's going to be over on Monday, but a lot of players are committing to enter the draft, some big names too. Let me ask you, if you don't mind, can we start with your thoughts on Quinn Ewers, at least for what you know now?
Well, I understand today he announced he's coming out. He's a guy that we've studied quite a bit. He would be in our top 10 of quarterbacks. We haven't put a round grade on these guys, that are etched in stone just yet. But, we think he's not a first-round pick at this point. But, he's got very good mechanics. He's inconsistent, and that's something that, bothers us a little bit. But he's got good arm strength. He's a solid quarterback. He's got some good movement skills. He can create a little bit. And, he's a good quarterback. I mean, obviously they have Arch Manning behind him. And, we watch those games too. And so, we think they're going to be pretty good in the future too.
Jon, this draft is chock full of running backs, a position that has been devalued. And I think to the detriment of the NFL. I think they're maybe finding that out now as the defense have maybe caught up to some of these offenses. With Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Cam Scatterbo, who are your favorites, and who are the guys that you think are the most likely to hit and work in the NFL?
Well, Genty, we think, is potentially a top 5 pick, which is very, very unique for a running back. I mean, he's a kid that he runs with really good power. He also gets in and out of trouble quickly. He's got good agility in traffic. You don't find that guy with the speed, the power. He can run inside and outside equally well. Those guys are hard to find. And, we think he's obviously the best one. We like Hampton, quite a bit. We think he's our second best. When I think he right now is the second best, running back on our list, that we've got. And, we think the thing with him is, he's got really good speed. He runs with, he's not as powerful maybe as some of the other guys, but he's a guy that can hit the home run for you. And he's a good player. I mean, you go down the list, there's a whole bunch of guys. We like Travion Henderson. We like, that breakaway speed and agility in traffic to go with it. I mean, he's not going to be an inside the tackle runner. He's not the biggest, but he's not the smallest either. That's a guy we really like. The other Ohio State, tandem and that running back, Judkins is another back we think is very solid. Now, you can go down the line. There's a lot of guys in this draft that are good players.
I'd like to ask you about one more because we cover the Big 12. Have you had a chance to watch much Cam Scatterbo, and just how does he translate?
Bro, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned. How could I forget him? He's the thing we like about him. He reminds me a little bit of Mike Allstott. I guess I'm really dating myself. But
no, it's all good.
He runs with power. He doesn't have the greatest speed. He's not the greatest athlete, but you talk about his want to. And how hard he plays. He's got great second effort as a back. He's got great hands as a receiver. He knows how to get open. He knows how to, make plays in traffic, and he runs with power. There's no quit in this guy, and he is one of our favorite players in this draft. We've got a guy that just one of my former players when I was coaching is now coaching at ASU, and his dad's out there at Arizona too, and they went to watch practice, and they said that they remark about this guy. He's all football, old school, tough kid, really good player.
He had a game, a slow start against Texas, but then picked it up, and obviously they had them on the ropes. But getting to the point, was he that kind of player? No matter what he would have done against Texas, had he not ended up with a pretty good game? One game, is that ever going to make or break a player like that?
That's far.
So much forgiveness. Wait, did you say forgiveness like far, or forgiveness like forgiveness? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. Forgiveness.
I'm hearing far.
Forgiveness. Like forgiveness. Forgiveness? Forgiveness.
I'm still hearing far, but whatever.
Introducing Stealth 2 with more carbon for more forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Just hit it.
No. Simple question is no. I mean, their answer is no. There's been a lot of guys that have had incredibly bad games for whatever reason, and they overcome it. And that's a good thing about him. You put it behind you, you learn from it, and then move on. And, that's what happened. I've seen great running backs. I've watched them all. I think I've seen all the great running backs in my years, going back to the Chicago Cardinals, Ollie Matson. And I've seen these guys fumble away games and come back the next week and gain 200 yards and are fine. So no, I don't believe that at all.
John, not a deep class for quarterbacks at all. Pretty deep for what are the best positions? Is it wide receiver, maybe offensive line, defensive line right now? Defensive
tackle, in my mind, is the deepest position. I don't just look at the top guys. I look at the depth of the group, and there's a lot of potential for, and I shouldn't say a lot. There's 4 or 5 potential first round picks that you would consider interior defenders, but we think there's potentially 25 to 28 draftable defensive tackles in this draft, and we're just kind of going through that list right now. And we really like that group. There's some really good wide receivers. There's some depth, there. I don't think this draft has, the extreme players at the top that are your, just surefire great two-way players, and everybody's got a little bit of weakness there. But there's some awfully good players at those positions.
Travis Hunter, a unique prospect to say the least. What do you like about Travis Hunter in terms of his versatility? How do you see him fitting in? What are his strong suits, and where is he big picture in your mind, John?
That's an interesting question because one of the things with him is there's some people that say, hey, he's a receiver first and cornerback second, and some people say the other, because he's definitely if he's not the top guy at both positions, he's in the top 2 or 3. And, we haven't necessarily, we've kind of graded him as 2 players, and we don't necessarily have him as the top receiver or the top corner, but you could make a case that he is because he's right there. And he, from what we understand, wants to play 2 ways. He wants to be a 2-way player. And, that's kind of unique. There's been a lot of guys that have, dabbled on one side of the ball or the other. And, I can't think of a guy that has been a bona fide long-term 2-way player for a long time. I go back to Roy Green, and I can remember him coming out as a DB and moved to receiver. And one year he had 3 games where he scored a touchdown on a pass and intercepted a pass. And the next year he's a full-time receiver. So, this is in uncharted territory, except maybe going back to the late 40s and early 50s as far as having a guy that he really feels he can play both ways. Now, let's say a team decides to do that. Let's say we're going to play him at corner, we're going to play at receiver, we're going to spell him maybe at receiver situationally, or spell him at corner situationally, or both. Then all of a sudden you get an injury, and now you may have had 2 starters. Now you've lost 2 starters. So there's some good and bad in that. But I kind of can see a scenario where he's the starting corner for some team, and he's the 3rd wide receiver, although most teams are using 11 personnel as their base, so 3 wide receivers are on the field most of the time. So, a rotational type situation at receiver, kind of makes sense to me, and being a starting corner. But hey, sure, there's other people are going to look at it a lot different.
When you pick someone that high, and there are names in the past, whether it was even back in the day, he wasn't really much of a pro at all, Johnny Rodgers, but Desmond Howard, Tim Brown, Rocket Ismail, et cetera, and I'm sure I'm missing a few. His head coach, that also is dynamic in the return game, but he really never did that much. Did that surprise you? Do you think that they would use him with that?
Well, I think one of the things that happens with these guys is, they're playing both ways. You got to rest them sometime.
No.
You got to rest them sometime.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back to, you got to go back a long ways before you find guys that are going to be, returners and, doing a lot of, two-way playing. But there have been some guys. I mean, Devin Hester, who just got in the Hall of Fame, he started out as a defensive back and returner, and then he became a receiver and returner, and he did get reps as a defensive player, offensive player, and as a returner. And obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame for one reason: he's a returner. As a returner, so yeah, it's a unique situation.
Jon, if you're the Titans right now, and you had to make the decision based on none of the rest of this, what would you do? Would it be Cam Ward or would it be Shedeur Sanders?
Oh God. Can I say none of the above?
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't know that these two quarterbacks are, worthy of the first or second pick in the draft. I think you got a lot of work to do with these guys. It's not like, last year when you had Jaden Daniels. I really believe Jaden Daniels could come out and step in and start for somebody right now, and we were right about that one.
Yeah, you were.
There's no Jaden Daniels there. And, Shedeur, he's got to learn pocket presence, or the Tennessee Titans had better have a really clean pocket for this guy and really have a great offensive line that can protect him, because that's a weakness right now. Somebody's going to have to coach that up. Now, you give him a clean pocket, there's nobody better in college football. He's accurate outside the numbers. He's got a very good ability to place the ball where guys can run and catch. He can throw guys open, but when the pocket starts breaking down, he takes a lot of sacks. He's not the most mobile guy, but he's not the least mobile either. So he needs to learn. He's got to use his feet. He's got to hit those check downs a little more often. And, they're going to have to coach him up to do that. And Cam Ward, he's got some of the same issues in terms of that, but he's better. He's better with pocket presence. He can create with his feet. He's not as accurate a passer. There's some inconsistencies in his game too. It depends on what you're looking for. Those are the only two guys that we think are first-round picks. And yes, we understand that a team that needs a quarterback and they're drafting early is probably is a good chance they'll take one of those guys. Probably I would go with Sanders right now if I had to take a quarterback as the first pick. That'd be the guy I would probably go with because he's got that NFL accuracy in terms of his ability to, make all the NFL throws.
You have hundreds of names that you're looking at, players who were going to go pro or not be eligible or not be good enough to play or not. But does this year have about the same number of pretty good, I would call blue chip type players entering early? Is there a certain amount? Is it usually 15 to 30 or what?
As we're trying to put together right now, we've been looking at these guys and writing reports, and we've stacked positions, but we're just starting to really try to value these players against each other. Like, for example, let's value Mason Graham, defensive tackle, against the wide receiver McMillan. Who's better? Who's going to be the number 2 player in the draft? Genty, where does he fit? So those are all the things that we're doing right now. And, we get to about 23, 24, and it's getting really hard. And what we think is, from about 35 to 65, there's a lot of really good value players. And we think there's a lot of guys that would be, maybe second and third round picks or have that value grade in another year that there's more of those guys than there are draft picks, in terms of that. So there's going to be some value getting into the fourth round. So, we think the strength of the draft is going to be from the second through the fourth round this year. So the blue chip athlete, in terms of, hey, they've got it all, whether it's an edge rusher or a defensive tackle or a guard or a tackle, there aren't as many of those guys, but there's a lot of solid football players, a lot of talent. And we think NIL has something to do with that. Some of these players that if they aren't necessarily projected to be, a high pick, they're opting to stay in school because the NIL money is good and there's no guarantees. I mean, you're seeing a little bit, maybe a lot of that too. We haven't evaluated that completely, but that's what our sense is.
Jon, do you have a player that you think isn't getting talked about enough so far that you've watched?
Well, there's a lot of them that I could talk about, from that perspective. There's a guy that the first one that comes to mind is Jack Sawyer from Ohio State, the edge rusher. He's really a good football player. The metrics like him better than I thought they would, in terms of speed, GPS speed, and all those kinds of things. In terms of get off, he's a lot better than people might think. People kind of look at him and say, well, he's a try-hard guy, probably second, third round. No, not really. I think this kid is a bona fide first-round pick. So I think people are talking about him, but I'm not sure they're looking at him, high enough. There's a cornerback, Jakari Harris from Iowa, who does everything well that I haven't seen on any list, anybody talking about him. And we think he's pretty good.
How many players do you have in your system? Is it everyone draft eligible, or is it 400? How many?
Right now, we've got in our database that we're working to pare down about maybe 1,300 players. And there's more that we could have in there. We're adding and subtracting. We subtracted some guys we had in there. Obviously, they're going back to school that we kind of anticipated might come out. And we're adding players. There's guys that are going to these bowl games. We're getting information from people that do metrics saying that this guy is worth looking at. And we eventually pare that down for our draft guide to about 850. And we give out maybe 310 draftable grades. Not all those guys get drafted, but a lot of times the range of the grade is 7th to our priority free agent, at the end. What is it, about 265 get drafted, I think, every year. So yeah, we overshoot that number a little bit because we know that we're going to miss on some guys. I mean, there's guys that we don't have in that top 300 that get drafted, and there's guys that we don't even have in that 850 that get drafted. Not very many. Doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So,
how many hours of film are you watching, or video are you watching a day?
Well, I'm saying, I've got other things I have to do besides that, for ours. But I'd say during the season, when we were looking at the preview, it'd be about 10 to 12. Now we're cut down a little bit, and with the season ending, we've done a lot of the work. Now we're kind of going back and looking at specific guys as we're trying to compare them, and some of the guys we looked at a lot earlier in the season. We're going back and looking at them to see if there's been any improvement. As we grade these guys out, we're starting to put final grades on these guys, but we got to wait for the pro days. We got to wait for the combine. We got to wait to see some of the metrics reports on some of these guys. We've gotten a lot of that from the early season, but I'll give you an example of a guy, Abdul Carter. We didn't particularly like him early in the year. He had moved from inside linebacker. He was an off-the-ball linebacker primarily at Penn State, playing on the edge. And it took him a while before he got used to his shoes, so to speak. And now he's playing at an extremely high level. He's a good chase player. And, we think that has really upgraded him as a draft choice.
Thanks, John. We look forward to it. If you don't mind, we'll just dip in maybe almost every week, as long as you're available, and try to find a day and a time to get you to come on and help us out over the next 2 or 3 months.
I'm usually around. I can give you a screenshot of some film.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, and we'll know more about who's entering the draft. You do a great job. Ourlads.com does an incredible job. You can go there, too, to Jon Cooper with us on just some of the players entering the draft. There's a bunch of them.